Hello everyone. Chapter 6 and 7 talk about the intervention assistance team process and the response to intervention process. We start with student support. Teachers teach, students learn. However, as we all know, students learn in their own way and at their own pace. So when you as a teacher do an initial informal assessment of student learning, you realize that some of your students understand and some didn't. So you do a few things. You either reteach, or you choose different modalities, or you provide a variety of activities for skill development. And more students understand and more students learn. However, there may be some challenging students. If you do have a particularly challenging student, you might talk with parents, you might consult with a colleague, someone else on your grade level, or former teachers that the student might have had, and you get some information about how to improve the way that you're connecting with the student. These chapters discuss a process of formalizing that practice for those for whom the informal consults are not enough. The idea of student support teams is not a new one. They started getting press back around the time that the first special education law, Public Law 94-142, first came around in the mid-70s. In the 80s and early 90s, we started talking about impact teams, making an impact on students' learning, making an impact on schools, making an impact on school districts. Most recently, we've come to define things a little bit more clearly in terms of roles and responsibilities, but ultimately we know that the learning of all students is all of our responsibility. Whether students have special needs, whether students are typical, whether we're a content area teacher or related services, we're all in this together. As I just mentioned, the student support teams come with a variety of different names, whether it be child support team, intervention assistance team, child study team, or response to intervention team. Ultimately, the goal is the same. It's finding ways of helping students succeed in school. Finding the tools that each unique child needs in order to have full access to the information we're providing, the skills we're developing, and the growth they need to maneuver through our system. As you can see, the guiding principles, we know that each child has his or her own unique needs, learning in their own way, again. Parents are actively involved, and we look at finding a variety of interventions, accommodations, modifications, etc., and new ways of monitoring their progress. Who's involved in these team meetings really depends on the school or the district. Parent is always involved. Classroom teacher is always involved. From there on, it depends on perspective and issues involved. Administrator from the school, school counselor, school psychologist, speech and language therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, school nurse, anyone else who might be involved with the student or have a connection or able to provide information. And it really is important to have a variety of different people, a multi-factored or multidisciplinary perspective. Einstein said that we see the world through our own eyes, meaning that we see the world through our own lens. Educators see things through a school lens, doctors see things through a medical lens, politicians see things through a political lens. So it's important to see things from a variety of perspectives. I have a pretty clear example. At an intervention assistance team meeting, a teacher brought forth a concern about a student who was off task and eyes wandering through the room, staring off, distractible, etc. And we started formulating ideas, opinions, hypotheses, and you start asking questions that might guide the discussion down a certain path. And some of us were thinking, those 4 letters, ADHD, with the distractibility and impulsivity and the staring off and those kinds of things. Luckily, the school nurse was at this meeting, and she said, I know some people are going to think about one thing, but I'm concerned, and I want to ask more questions about the staring. And so she started asking more questions about the staring and said, I'm wondering whether or not this staring is an indicator of a seizure disorder. And Mom freaked out a little bit, and we talked a little bit more about the different kinds of seizures, and the meeting ended. Mom signed the student out, took her to the doctor, and they did indeed diagnose a seizure disorder, for which medication was very effective, and the seizures were under control. So it's really important, because if that didn't happen, we could have gone down another path of creating interventions and strategies that would focus on the inattention, the distractibility. That would have not worked. But we would have done that for a while and modified and adjusted and revisited, and maybe a month later then say, okay, what are we missing? And then possibly have come up with, oh, maybe it's something medical. So luckily we had a variety of different people, and the nurse was there. We need to share our opinions and share our ideas and share our perspectives so that we can come up with the best possible answer. These next few slides attempt to provide a distinction between interventions, accommodations, and modifications. There's a simple explanation and then some examples of what interventions are, and the same thing goes for accommodations and modifications. Because that language is important and sometimes it's confusing. So take a look at those slides. I'm not going to read them to you, but just peruse them, and I'll meet you down about 5 slides from here. Thanks. This slide, the next few slides, give a brief description of the response to intervention process. Some make clear distinctions between student support teams, intervention assistance teams, and response to intervention teams. I don't. I believe that the response to intervention process is within the intervention assistance team process. I see the IAT as an umbrella and RTI as a tool. RTI is a process by which we look at monitoring students throughout our school, throughout our district. It starts with a universal screener, and some of you have looked at universal screeners like Dibbles or AimsWeb or STARS or Fontes and Pinnell, one of those things. The universal screener then gives us these results. And we're hoping that about 80% of the students are performing in Tier 1, so that just general good instruction is sufficient, and they're doing well in school. We're hoping that only about 15% or less need something in Tier 2, where there be some targeted interventions, something a little additional, a little boost that's going to help them along. And then the rest, up in the red area, we're hoping that there are very few students who might need intense interventions. If the results of your universal screener are not like this, then there are questions to ask. If you have, an inverse of this, where there's a whole bunch of students in the red and the yellow and very few in the green, then either there's something wrong with the screener, or something's going on with the curriculum, or the method of instruction, or the assessment practices, or something's happening, and that's a systemic issue, not a student-focused issue or even a classroom teacher issue. It's systemic. And so then you need to look at school-wide or district-wide kinds of answers, or district-wide interventions, that you might even say. And so you look at what's happening in the Tier 1 area, and again, that's hopefully covered in your curriculum, in good teaching practices, in student-centered kinds of activities that go on in your classroom. Tier 2, then you look more specifically at what do these groups of students need to be successful in school. And then Tier 1 is, what does this one in particular student need intensely from me in order to develop tools and strategies and ideas to understand and be successful in school. Sometimes those students in the red area then, if there's not a positive response to the intervention, they might be then referred for evaluation for special education. I'm not going to talk in too much detail about this RTI process because I've provided a link for you in the week 5 checklist that goes to an IRIS module that does a really good job of demonstrating the RTI process. And so take a look at that module, go through the cycle that's through the challenges, through the assessment process that's in the IRIS module through Vanderbilt. And then also we are involved in a forum that is posted for the intervention assistance teams or child study teams, and we're going to talk just about that. How does this work in your school? What's it called in your school? Who are the people involved in your school? And what is the role of the classroom teacher in your school? And look for that in the forum area. Thank you for taking the time to watch this podcast. And if you have questions, if there's something specific, either send me an email or post it in the questions and answers area of the forum. Or if they're pretty general kinds of things about process, maybe your questions would be great in the intervention assistance team forum, and so that we can get responses from a variety of different people across different classrooms and school districts. I do believe that we learn from each other, and so there's no one best way. So getting information from all the different school districts involved in this class would be a great benefit, and I appreciate the input. And I'll see you at our next face-to-face.